Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Tuesday, August 10th, 2021. My name is Sam Seder. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Nick Estes, host of the Red Nation podcast and co-author of the Red Nation Rising, From Bordertown Violence to Native Liberation. Also on the program today, 19 Republicans vote yes for the bipartisan infrastructure bill, which has just momentarily passed, or I should say moments ago passed in the Senate. Meanwhile, Democrats unveil the $3.5 trillion budget blueprint. This is for the infrastructure reconciliation bill, the Vote-a-Rama, where amendments will be offered by anybody and everybody to start today. Meanwhile, it's unclear how the White House will deal with the debt limit vote as Yellen calls for Congress to raise it. The Delta variant now sending more children to the hospital as schools in Republican states are suing those states to be allowed to require masks for students when they show up at schools. Arkansas on the verge of running out of ICU beds as Texas Governor Abbott desperately seeks for outside help. U.S. military has gotten the word, and they will mandate vaccines. And as we speak, lonely Andrew Cuomo is speaking and scrambling to buy time as impeachment looms in the New York State Assembly. Meanwhile, the Biden administration accused in court filings of violating the Flores Agreement over deplorable conditions in detaining immigrant children. Lastly, climate change could be on the verge of permanently disrupting a delicate Atlantic Ocean balance, last experienced in the lead-up of the last ice age. All this and more on today's program. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Apologies. Again, we've gotten just a flood of news is happening as we go live. One being the passage of the $1 trillion infrastructure bill, the Portman Cinema bill. This has about $550 billion of new spending, and then another $450 billion, which has been sort of reappropriated from some of the COVID relief bills, other places. Nevertheless, $550 billion of new infrastructure spending, a sufficient, I should say necessary but insufficient down payment on some of the physical infrastructure in this country, including things like public transportation and broadband internet, a way of transitioning to electric cars. And this, as we have the new IPCC report that came out from the United Nations, which says that we're just in real rough shape in terms of climate change. And with that, hello, Emma Vigland. How are you?
Hello. I'm fine, despite the existential dread of climate change.
You know, it is...
And COVID and our country falling apart. It
is amazing to me that there are 7 states, I think it was, 6 or 7 states. I headlined this. I think Texas, Florida, Oklahoma, maybe Arkansas, a couple others, where the schools, sometimes school systems, sometimes individual public schools, are suing their states to simply be allowed to require students to wear masks. And then you think about the idea.
I know.
You think about the idea that we are trying to deal with climate change, and we can't even deal with the pandemic that's right in front of our faces. As Arkansas runs out of ICU beds, as Texas, the state where the lieutenant governor bragged about sacrificing their older folks for the sake of the younger folks who are now going into the hospital at a higher rate than they were with the wild type of COVID. It is really disturbing. We have new breaking news that it warrants this. Do you have my board up, Matt? Okay. We only bring out this music when it's really important.
The royalties are crazy on it.
It is now being reported, I guess, by Governor Andrew Cuomo himself during this speech that has been going on since we started the show, that Andrew Cuomo is resigning from office, and his resignation will be effective within 14 days.
Boom!
That is it, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes, the writing was on the wall about that impeachment, old buddy, old pal.
Yep, I think Andrew Cuomo did not want to be impeached. It is. Let's play that clip. Do we have that clip?
Yeah, this is from his press conference where, he won't admit to sexually assaulting / harassing people, but is this the one where he says he didn't realize how the line had been drawn, or? Oh,
this is him resigning. Now, we should say that what preceded this was him saying he has once again reevaluated his behavior. This is like the 4th or 5th reevaluation of his behavior that he's had. And he has once again reevaluated his behavior with, I would imagine, all 11 women. And I mean, let's be honest. If you need to reevaluate your behavior with 11 women, including one state trooper who, is on your security detail, the chances are there might be more than those 11 that you've probably been
And after
inappropriate.
denying, then casting aspersions on the investigation that you asked for, the independent investigation. I mean, let's be real. The only reason his reevaluation has come to a different conclusion is because of pending political humiliation.
Right. I mean, his aides have all. His aides have quit. We have leaders of other groups who were advising him. The leader of one of the Me Too groups had to quit because she had advised him on how to navigate this.
Yeah.
Here is Andrew Cuomo saying bye-bye.
This is one of the most challenging times for government in a generation. Government really needs to function today. Government needs to perform. It is a matter of life and death, government operations. And wasting energy on distractions is the last thing that state government should be doing. And I cannot be the cause of that. New York tough means New York loving. And I love New York. And I love you. And everything I have ever done has been motivated by that love. And I would never want to be unhelpful in any way. And I think that given the circumstances, the best way I can help now is if I step aside.
I really hope you don't love New Yorkers in the way that you like to express love, or at least I guess I should say it's an
Just
expression
domination.
of power.
Right.
Right. I mean, does he know the difference between power and expressions of affection and love? Seems to be the only thing he loves is power.
Well, the bottom line is, I think he has chosen the best sort of rhetorical route out, if you will, which is to make himself the martyr for the sake of good governing. He would, of course, be exonerated, but he does not want to put New York through this trauma because of those multitude of people who have insisted that he did something that, of course, he did not do. And because he's not only New York tough, but he's New York love, he will step aside because he's the bigger and better man than all of the women who accused him, and of course, all of the men who wanted to hold him to account. In fact, he is the best of all of us. And therefore, he has decided to step down, even though none of you deserve that break that he's giving everyone, but it's because he loves you.
Right.
And doesn't want you to distract everyone, including him, from the job he needs to do.
Exactly. And, this is the way that Cuomo, sort of eases into that CNN job. That so it will be, Chris Cuomo and then Andrew Cuomo.
Or maybe they'll do it together. It'll be, kind of the Robert De Niro, Arnold Schwarzenegger twins reboot, CNN style.
Cuomos? Yeah. They could call it Cuomos.
Cuomos with a Z on the end.
You get that Kelly
Make it
Cuoco
funky.
too.
Yeah, or
Cuomos
C squared. I mean, there's a whole lots of opportunity. But Andrew Cuomo is exiting stage. Whichever, I don't know. He'll
center.
Yeah.
I think it's probably, and he will be replaced, at least in the interim, with Kathy Hochul, who is the lieutenant governor. She is from a progressive perspective, she is no prize whatsoever. And however, I do not anticipate her stay in office to be terribly extended. And it will be interesting to see what we will see in terms of like the New York State legislature, if they and what bills will or will not be signed under these circumstances. There's going to be a lot to talk about in terms of this. And remember, as New York centric as this may sound for a show that is talks about national politics, we should just remind people that New York can function as a model for all sorts of types of legislation to show the rest of the country what can be done with progressive governing. And so hopefully we'll see that opportunity going forward. But it is for those of us who have had both a real problem with Andrew Cuomo's governance that goes beyond the realm of his sexual harassment over the course of really his entire tenure. This is a big opportunity for New York State because he is simply not going to be the political player that he has been, frankly, for several decades. He was a big fixer under the governorship of his father. Then spent about 10 years at HUD, more or less, and back in New York State as AG, and then ultimately as governor. And for those of us who are always concerned that maybe this guy's going to have a national future in the Democratic Party, although I think that was concerns about that were just concerns. I don't think that they were grounded in any actual. Andrew Cuomo was not going to play outside of New York State, in my estimation. But now, He is definitely not.
March 2020, Emma disagrees. Also, did I say Robert De Niro? I meant Danny DeVito.
Danny DeVito? Oh, there you go. Yeah, everybody was confused about your twins reference.
I'm sorry, guys. Well, I mean, I try to keep it topical. But this is a good, you're right. This is a good day. This is a good day because, you know, I think it's apt to call him Democratic Trump, right? In terms of his politics and the way that he operates within the party and the way he bullies people and the way that he seizes control. Like, he's not a cult of personality, but there are people who still back him vociferously to this day. And if there is a vestige of that kind of politics in the Democratic Party, like, it should be cut out like a tumor. And, you know, it needed to be a sexual harassment scandal that forced him out, and it needed to be so obvious and incontrovertible that he you know, got rid of it, resigned himself. But it had to happen. Well, I mean, I don't. You and I will debate this question as to whether he was a Democratic Trump. I mean, the thing about a governor versus a president, and particularly one who had just entered into politics, is Andrew Cuomo's power was really founded in a whole network of transactional relationships in New York State. In the second half of our show, Nomi will join us, and we will be digging deep into this. But this is it, Andrew Cuomo, done. I do not think that we will be hearing much about him, at least in the context of politics. And for that, that makes me happy. All right, we're gonna take a quick break. When we come back, we'll be talking to Nick Estes. He's the host of the Red Nation podcast and the author of Red Nation Rising: From Bordertown Violence to Native Liberation. We'll be right back after these words. And these are the words, ladies and gentlemen. Hey, we have got a new newsletter. We had thousands of people who were enjoying the AM Quickie. But sadly, it wasn't tens of thousands of people who were enjoying the AM Quickie, which was a morning podcast we would do. You know, sometimes, we had a very dedicated audience, not quite 10,000, but nearly there, who were listening to it on audio. And sometimes we get big numbers on YouTube and sometimes not. But it just wasn't sustainable, really. Since COVID, we were growing and then COVID hit, and that's it. But we had a lot of people who really enjoyed the content, really enjoyed the context that it gave people in first thing in the morning. And so we're now delivering it to your email inboxes as an email newsletter, just one page, relatively quick, shows you what you may have missed on the show, but also gives you a heads up on stories that some of which are covered in the mainstream media and some of which are not, may fly under the radar, important things to give you a context in this day and age. And so check it out. I think you'll enjoy it. It's very easy for you to get. You just go to majority.fm, scroll all the way down to the bottom where it says newsletter. You put your email address in and you press a button, and then you're on the list. You're in the in. Send it to your friends. And read it every morning. And we never sell your email address or anything like that. Emma combs through them occasionally just to look at what the funny email addresses are, and that's it. Right. Well, to sign up, you need to send us your password and your social security number. I hold on to those. Don't worry about it. It's just, you can trust her. On a scrap of yellow paper that I post to my refrigerator. Don't forget, this show relies on your support. You can become a member by going to jointhemajorityreport.com. Okay, want to welcome to the program Nick Estes. He's the host of the Red Nation podcast, author of the Red Nation Rising: From Bordertown Violence to Native Liberation. We should say that his contributors to that book include David Correa, Radmila Cody, Brandon Benali, and Melanie Yazzie. Nick, welcome to the program. I'm here with Emma Vigeland.
Hi, Thanks for having me on. I'm happy to be here.
Will you just there's a bunch of different stuff I want to talk to you about that you've also written a book in the past about water protectors and the pipelines, and we have an ongoing fight right now with Line 3, as you obviously know. But before we get there, I just want to start with Red Nation. Tell us what that is, in the activism that you've been doing.
Sure. So Red Nation was founded in the summer of 2014 after the brutal slayings of 2 Navajo men who were killed by vigilantes in Albuquerque. And this was part of a pattern of what they call Indian rolling in the Southwest, where predominantly non-Native or white men go around and beat up Native people, sometimes killing them. This is a historical pattern in places, where I'm calling you from right now, which is a place called Rapid City, with a very high Native population, with a lot of discrimination, in places we call Bordertowns, or the white-dominated settlements that ring Indian reservations. And in the Southwest, where the Red Nation was formed, there was also, patterns of, there was the Chokecherry Massacre, as it was called in the 70s, where a group of young white high school students went and beat up Navajo men on the streets of Farmington and actually took souvenirs, cutting off fingers, cutting off pieces of skin, hanging them in their locker. So this has been an ongoing pattern of violence that is also part and parcel to police violence and surveillance of Native people off the reservation. And so the Red Nation formed kind of out of that tradition and thinking about how Native people, primarily our experiences off reservation. About 4 out of 5 Native people don't live on Federal Reserve land, but in fact live in cities. And this is part of a pattern of relocation, but also just economic opportunity off reservation. So we formed to kind of meet the needs of Bordertown Native communities. And currently, we're still based in Albuquerque, New Mexico. We have an office there. We do mutual aid work. We were actively involved in the protests last summer. We've done some more community work based on like gardening, food sovereignty, and things of that nature. But we're also moving into the media realm. We have our podcast. You can all check it out. But we are an indigenous-led organization that centers LGBTQ leadership as well as indigenous feminism.
Let's talk about this concept of border towns and what was it? I mean, there's obviously like a huge vacuum in just sort of I guess analyzing that concept of border. What was the origins of your deciding to write about it? But also let's talk about the concept of border towns as well.
Yeah, academics tend to make up words, which can be helpful, but also unhelpful. And so we just took the common vernacular of what Native people call these towns, which is border towns, right? Oftentimes, we think of border towns as those on the US-Mexico border specifically. And that kind of erases, the international character of Native relationships with the United States government, because if these aren't borders, then why would the United States sign 350 treaties with Native nations if they didn't recognize their sovereignty, right? And so that's how we understand it in just the kind of common vernacular. And there is an experience that a lot of us have, in relation, like again, going back to Rapid City, where I'm calling you from, a place called that Lakota people call Minneapolis. There, a lot of people come from the reservation to do their shopping here, right? There was recently a report that came out in CNN that described the behavior of a Rapid City police officer who was following a man who he claimed to be Native driving a Mercedes-Benz, who turned out later, according to this police officer, to be white, and so therefore he backed off and didn't pull him over. And that was just readily admitted, but this is part of a culture of police violence and surveillance of Native people off the reservation. And that's why we use that term, border town, and to think of these spaces as contested spaces. Because if they weren't contested spaces, why the hyper policing? Why the hyper surveillance? And this might seem sort of counterintuitive to a lot of the listeners or the viewers of this show, because you may not think about Native people on a daily basis, right? And that's part of the ideological project of elimination, of eliminating Native presence from our daily lives. But that doesn't mean that Native people are somehow, forgotten about by law enforcement, where there is, where there is a visible presence, especially in the U.S. West, where I've done a lot of my work, not only in community organizing, but also in journalism.
That's fascinating. So just to be clear, we're, when you're talking about these cities or towns, the introducing essentially white people, non-indigenous people, to the concept that this space means means different things depending on your perspective here, right? Is that and the idea for non-indigenous people, it's just a city that is within the United States, as opposed to the experience of indigenous people who see this as a town that represents a multitude of different things, both positive and negative, I guess, on some level too, in terms of like perhaps some opportunities that don't exist on native land, but also they're limited, I guess, on some level as to what the opportunities could be by the policing that takes place there.
Right. Yeah, I think y'all are calling in from New York, right? I don't know where y'all are calling in from, but New York City has the largest native urban population. Most people don't know that because it's not readily, it's not readily available. It's not like what, Manhattan is a Lenape name. It's for the original people who are from there, and some of them still live there. So this idea, that native presence is always under constant erasure. And there's some studies, that say, like, I think a quarter of white people in this country may have actually met a Native person in real life, like that they know of, that they remember. But that's part of the project, is kind of erasing these zones and boundaries and Native sovereignty in general. And if we think about like the George Floyd uprising, Minneapolis is an incredibly important city historically. For one, there was an active Black freedom movement in the streets of Minneapolis in the 60s. There was something called the Soul Patrol, where Black activists would go around and surveil police violence against Black people in the streets. And they were teaming up with another organization called the American Indian Movement, who was doing the exact same thing. And so when George Floyd was killed, it was also the Native community that was coming out at that particular time. I'm not from Minneapolis. I've only visited several times. I'm moving there next year, but the communities, the Black and Native communities, are very much concentrated in similar areas in the city, and so there is that history. And so if we look at like an organization like the Black Panthers, for example, they were formed in response to that kind of police violence, and we understand that. But we kind of don't remember that same history about the Red Power movement, that it actually formed in response to police violence off reservation, right? And so we're really just continuing that kind of tradition. And if we look at a place like Line 3, to bring it up to the present, that is all off reservation policing and criminalization of Native people. And for what? To enforce the usurpation, not only of the land, but the rights to that water itself. And who's funding it? The Public Utility Commission of Minnesota created an escrow account that Enbridge is dumping millions of dollars in to pay police overtime, right? So in many ways, we want to say that those frontiers are settled. This is northern Minnesota. It's the deep north, as they call it. And it really is. It's like, I was there. It was very reminded me of South Dakota, and Minnesota kind of likes to pride itself as like an extension of Canada or something like that. But it really is there is a very hyper visibility of being a Native person, especially in the context of the pipeline protests, and especially having out-of-state plates. But I can talk a little bit more about that, but that is really just an intensification of what Native people experience on a daily basis living off reservation when it comes to police surveillance, harassment, and also just daily forms of discrimination.
And you mentioned the visibility of Native people in the area where Line 3, these protests are happening and the pipeline's being built. Same with the Dakota Access Pipeline. There's a reservation there. There's an understanding and a visibility. And I can't speak for Line 3, but when I was at the Dakota Access Pipeline, you really just get the sense that police see it as an us versus them occupying mentality. And, you bring up Black Americans. That's often what we see with how police approach cities in this country. Mm-hmm. I'm just curious about your perspective on that, because when there is more visibility, as you say, a more defined Native population in an area, I'd imagine that increases this us versus them tension, and then of course it boils over with acts of civil disobedience when it comes to pipelines or protests. Right.
The patch for the North Dakota State Patrol is actually the side profile of Red Tomahawk, who was an Indian police who assassinated Sitting Bull during an arrest in December 15th of 1890. So when water protectors were going through the court system in North Dakota, in some of the courtrooms they had a picture of Red Tomahawk, as like I'm not quite sure the entire the symbolism of it, but for me it represented like an assertion of authority, of criminal jurisdiction and authority over Native people. Like, one of ours killed one of yours, who was also one of yours. But the way that police power was mobilized, we didn't see that kind of mobilization of police in tandem working with the National Guard, since the 1890 Pine Ridge campaign, when they sent half the standing army to the reservations of the West to crush the ghost dance, right? And the language that they used, not just the law enforcement, but also the private security, and calling these religious, inspired uprisings that were, akin to jihadist terrorism, right, in the Middle East, because these contractors were veterans of those wars, either as mercenaries or as military veterans themselves. And so this was very much a militarized operation. And they now have these things called fusion centers, where they are combining military tactics and strategy to suppress pipeline, or to suppress protests in rural spaces, right? And they're taking, because the urban area is much different than the context, of the countryside. At Standing Rock, you were there. Sometimes you would march, and when you go to marches in cities, there's like cameras and there's an audience. But in the context of like these rural spaces, more isolated spaces, the camera or the audience is on the live stream, and so there's a whole kind of different scenario that's at play. And in a place like South Dakota, which was expecting these massive protests akin to Standing Rock, the governor, local law enforcement, the sheriff's, deputies, as well as state patrol, highway patrol here, was working hand in hand with the National Guard. And the National Guard actually created, as we know now from leaked documents, created policies and procedures that allowed them to use lethal force to protect pipeline infrastructure, right? So these are laboratories of experimentation. And this is the language that law enforcement is using. They're going around the country and teaching other law enforcement jurisdictions to do this. They're teaching the local sheriff's deputy offices that are now policing the Line 3 protest, right? So, and then to kind of bring it home into like an international context, the state of South Dakota, or excuse me, the state of North Dakota issued a state of emergency during the Dakota Access Pipeline protests. And that allowed them to tap into the Emergency Management Assistance Compact, which had been used previously by Maryland to crush the uprisings around Freddie Gray, the killing of Freddie Gray, right? And so they solicit resources from other counties, from other municipal governments, from state governments, and they send those in. And so at Standing Rock, you had 93 or 92 different law enforcement jurisdictions, ranging from federal, border patrol down to local county sheriff's departments. And recently, the state of Arizona and the state of Texas issued declared a state of emergency concerning the influx of migrants coming from Mexico, but also, we know that they're coming from other Latin American and Central American countries. So the state of South Dakota answered the call under Christine Nome, and they're sending National Guard right down there. But who's footing the bill? A billionaire stepped forward and said that he would pay $1 million to deploy the National Guard in Texas. Right. And we know that a lot of these migrants who are coming over the border are indigenous themselves. And so this isn't just a quote unquote domestic issue, but it's completely imbricated within the war on terror kind of industrial complex, right? That has expanded not only, international military operations, but domestic surveillance. And we're coming on 20 years of 9/11 and the inauguration of the US war on terror. So these things continue. I think we can expect to see more of it.
We should say too that I think that we've seen a similar sort of transition, if you will, or mutation of the private prison industry when investors knew 10, 15 years ago we may see a decline in domestic prisoners and we're going to move into the immigration space type of situation, and these infrastructure are built. And then they just exist and seek out sort of new products, but with, that they're going to sort of run through the system on some level. But with that said, will you talk about the lineage, sort of the through time as we see the, settler colonialism and what was, more specifically the military that was being used to police indigenous people on some level has just simply mutated into what you've described as a sort of a conglomeration of different police agencies that have literally fused together in these DHS fusion centers. But will you talk about that lineage and how it has been more or less unbroken, since non-indigenous people arrived here, and also how that relates to property, because we're all funding all of this police protection for a pipe,
right?
We're not even getting the benefits of. Like, there's just nothing. Right. It's a sort of a bizarre scenario when you contemplate that.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of flies in the face of the kind of like right-wing theory of like a small state, a small state government, a small government, and the proliferation of business. But in fact, we see over and over again that the massive state intervention to facilitate the accumulation of capital, the creation of private property, right? The profits over not just people, but also the land itself that nurtures and sustains us, not just native people. This isn't like some kind of esoteric argument that like somehow we're unique. Everyone drinks water, everyone breathes air. And we can see that, right? That the intervention of the state on behalf of industry is the story of this country, right? I'm going beyond the context of the book, so I apologize. The book itself is more of a primer to kind of give you the conceptual tools to understand the issue, and hopefully we'll come out with another book to kind of expand on some of these things. But the question you ask kind of goes beyond, a little bit beyond the scope of the book, but it is important to talk about because the longest campaign, if you just look at the symbols of the United States, on the U.S. Army flag, there's battle streamers, right? For all the campaigns. The longest military campaign is the Indian Wars, and there are 14 battle streamers. It begins in 1790 and ends in 1891, in January of 1891 with the Pine Ridge campaign. They still consider the Wounded Knee Massacre a military engagement, a battle, so to speak. And there's 18 medals of honor that were awarded to those who killed mostly women and children that day. But the history of that kind of military intervention, it is incredibly important because it's actually what created the modern military, the modern U.S. military. It was forged in the Indian Wars and also counterinsurgency. And if you're a student at West Point and you take the course on counterinsurgency, in the first chapter of the book that they assign, they talk about the Indian Wars as a model example. And they actually talk about boarding schools as a form of counterinsurgency. So there's no masking of this, of the purpose of reservations, of the purpose of the kind of military campaigns that were waged against Native people in the military itself. It recognizes that tradition. And in many ways, we say that the U.S. war on terror is the longest war, but that's actually not true. I mean, even according to the military zone definition, if you look going back to those battle streamers, there's 14 of them that lasted over a century. And so what you see with the arrival of the reservation period, especially at the end of the 19th century, is a different form of policing, right? And a different form of counterinsurgency, and creating the Indian police as a kind of arm of the federal government to assert jurisdiction and control over the reservations themselves. And then you see the transition of that right into the 20th century with the migration of Native people off reservation, but nonetheless still, like in places like Rapid City, still an open hostility to people living off reservation. Here in this city, for example, we talk a little bit about it in the book. But there was an urban Native population going back to the turn of the century. They moved here to this city to be closer to the children who were taken for the boarding school. And later on, when the boarding school closed down and became a tuberculosis clinic, they were pushed into a shanty town called Oshkosh Camp. Later on, that became moved north of the city, and then was turned into what we now know as Lakota Homes. But there was thousands of acres of land still in federal trust that was taken by the city itself. And so this idea that somehow Native people live in rural isolated pockets of poverty, somewhere else it's somebody else's problem, kind of ignores how cities themselves as institutions of rule have participated in not only the policing and the surveillance of Native people, but also the taking of Native land itself. And so Rapid City is one example, right? And we can look at Albuquerque, where I currently live, and is completely surrounded by reservations to the point that it can't physically grow anymore, and that it has to negotiate its water rights with the surrounding tribal nations, the Tiwa and the Tewa nations, the Pueblos that are around that particular place. And this comes with incredible amounts of violence. Like in the reporting that I did and some of the stories that we include in the book, we talked to people on the streets. There was a Navajo woman, her name was Jolene Nez. She was actually at one of the protests that we held back in 2014 when we first formed as the Red Nation, in honor of Cowboy and Rabbit, those two Navajo men who were slain by white vigilantes. She was there at that protest, and this last January, she was picked up on a littering charge she was fined $150, I believe, for kicking over a cup of soup on the sidewalk in front of the place called the Indian Center, where there's a lot of services for people, the Indian community, the Native community. And she didn't show up, she didn't pay her fine. and then was later picked up on a bench warrant for a $150 fine for kicking over a bowl of soup. She later died under mysterious circumstances that we don't fully understand, while she was held in MDC, right? And this is during, COVID-19. And it just shows, and this is what we talk about in the book, and this is what we talk about in terms of understanding indigenous rights. It just shows that they're more willing to put you in jail than to offer you, a home or a dignified life. And that's the premise of the book. And that's not a unique situation to just indigenous people, but the context, the colonial context of how that policing, that surveillance, and that premature death happens.
How much, and I don't want to impose this on there, but how much of that dynamic, when we talk about colonialism and surveillance and border towns for that matter, do you see in the context of the Palestinians and Israel occupation of Palestinian lands, and also I'm curious as to the Palestinians speak of the Nakba, there's a name, and it's temporally, at least there's a temporal sort of flagpole for when the disaster happened, when they were physically removed from their lands in 1948. Is that type of trauma, is it harder on some level to deal with that type of trauma that exists in the context of indigenous people in this country when it's so temporally spread out that it's almost like it's not necessarily you can look back on it because it's still sort of like rolling forward into time? I'm sorry, maybe those are two different questions, but they occurred to me simultaneously. I apologize.
No, it's I had the opportunity to go to Palestine for an organization called the Palestine Literary Festival. The Palestinian literary community isn't technically really allowed to have this festival. It's been tear gassed in the past. And some people have been denied access, both Palestinian and non-Palestinian. But one thing that was, I learned about the Nakba. I knew about Palestine, like theoretically, about settler colonialism, but I've never seen it on the ground. And I guess the place that really kind of solidified it for me was a place called Al-Lid, which is technically within the occupied 48 territories. It's Israel claims it, right? It would be it's sort of akin to a border town, but not really. It's that analogy doesn't really quite work and hold up. But nonetheless, the erasure of not just like Palestinian presence, but Palestinian culture, Palestinian symbols, mosques. When we actually pulled in our vehicle to go through this kind of tour of this place where there was this massacre, the man who greeted us, this Palestinian, our guide, and he was a historian, he started crying, and we're like, what's going on? And he said, he's like, just get off, just get out of the car. And so we got out of the car, and he walked us to a road, and he said, this is a mass grave that you parked on, and they turned it into a parking lot. And during the Nakba, when the IDF soldiers were coming in, this town, they weren't trained, they weren't militarized, they weren't like that wasn't their intention to, attack Jewish settlers or anything like that. But when the IDF came through, they began to shoot people and kick them out of their homes. And so they all holed up into a mosque that was there. And the IDF soldiers, they were there for like 2 weeks, and the IDF soldiers got really upset that they were there. So they started lobbing grenades into the mosque. And these were just mostly women and children. And they killed several hundred people, and then buried them into a mass grave, and then covered up the crime by putting a parking lot over it. That is what we've experienced here on multiple levels, multiple registers, as you said, both spatially and temporally, across time, across different places. Palestine is about the size of the state of New Jersey, to put that into perspective. We're talking about billions of acres of territory. We're talking about hundreds of different tribal nations. with different histories, different languages. But yes, I mean, in many ways, there's an eventfulness to something like the Nakba. It happened in 1948, but it doesn't mean that it ended, so to speak, because it's an ongoing process, much like, Huerte for Navajo people, which is called the Long Walk, which would, be somewhat akin to their Nakba, like that is an ongoing process. They never fully recovered from that as a people because it was meant to destroy them. It was meant to annihilate them. And genocide is something that I think people misunderstand in this country, because it's not about the utter annihilation of a people. It's about the attempted annihilation of a people. And so resistance factors into that incredibly so. And so that's what we really try to bring out in this book, something that I emphasize in this work. It's that these aren't complete processes, right? Much like decolonization, if there isn't a moment of that, won't be just an event, right? It'll be a process, because we're working against hundreds of years of history that we have to undo.
You write some of this in the manifesto at the end of the book, and there's also a similar manifesto that we can find on your website. But what are the key elements to that process? That of, to the extent decolonization or that process of ending the erasure, what are things that, both from a perspective of an indigenous person and non-indigenous person, what are those things?
Land back. Land back.
Land back.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I David Troyer, who had a proposal in the Atlantic, monthly, which seemed like one of the most obvious things I've ever heard, frankly, which is start with the national parks that we took from indigenous people, both from like a, for like just like both a justice perspective, but also from like a just purely administrative material perspective. It seems like a great way to protect these parks for people who actually care about the parks, but also, I mean, speak to that concept of land back, because I'm not quite sure that from a non-indigenous perspective, it necessarily translates. It's like, well, wait a second, we won't be, where will we go? Will you explain that concept, that it means something maybe different than we perceive of people who have like this concept of property rights that may be a little bit different from indigenous people?
Yeah. White supremacy is a fear-based ideology. So like everything that kind of challenges the status quo automatically becomes a threat. And oftentimes there's a projection, right? Of, oh, they're going to do to us, what we did to them. And there's a cynicism attached to that. And it's completely counterproductive in understanding. I mean, this comes from both, the extreme right, in the state of South Dakota, they're actively removing indigenous people from the curriculum in the K through 12 system and attacking the university system with this absurd threat of critical race theory. And there's even acknowledgement by these people. They're like, we don't even teach this, but we will never teach it. It's like, we don't know what it is, but we don't like it. Which is just like, is not helpful. It's not a helpful conversation. And this, also comes from the left. There's always this accusation that Native people are trying to create an ethno-state. It's like, bro, we live in an ethno-state. Like this is an ethno-state. We're trying to be the alternative to an ethno-state, but it also assumes that Native sovereignty is somehow an exclusive sovereignty. And Emily Riddle, who is a Métis theorist and scholar, I had her on my show, and she made this really important, this really beautiful comment that I still think about. She said, our strength is not in our exclusivity. Our strength is in our diversity. And that's actually what our sovereignty is about, is understanding that multiple worlds can exist and overlap, and that there's not a clear like delineation between us and them, especially when we all need to live on the same land in some way. And the current mode of living on this land is one of based on private property and exclusivity. I mean, whiteness is property, and that's not a metaphor that's the reality, you know. But we also have to infuse that into a class-based politics. We can't say that the checker at Walmart has anything in common with Joe Biden, right? And that they come from, you know, various class positions, and that white supremacy has taught them that they somehow have something in common, perhaps with Joe Biden or, you know, Donald Trump, when in fact they're diametrically opposed in their outlook, but also in how they survive, you know. And so I think there's an opportunity to really infuse, this isn't just to say like, oh, this is just a race-based politics that only Native people can participate in, but it's also to fundamentally misunderstand genocide as a suppression of a certain class of people, of Native people, and to remove us, right? Whereas like the poor people in Europe were removed from their land so that they had to work in factories, and then they became a surplus population to colonize this area because they were landless and, you know, looking for opportunity and new ways to make their lives. We were never seen as a viable labor pool. We were never seen as imagined in the future of this country. We were just seen as an impediment for the kind of capitalist development that we see in this country. So they annihilated a large section of us to a part of the working class. And that's where we have to stretch our understanding of how capitalism, American capitalism, develops specifically, and American imperialism develops specifically in relation to Native people. That doesn't remove us from the working class. We still, you know, when we talk about treaty rights and we talk about clean drinking water, we talk about housing, we talk about adequate healthcare, those are things everybody needs. Like, those are universal rights. They're not particular to us. But it begins with our relationship with the land. And that's really what my understanding of land back means.
Nick Estes, host of the Red Nation podcast, author of Red Nation Rising, From Bordertown Violence to Native Liberation. We'll put links to both those at majority.fm. Thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on.
All right, folks, quick break. Then we'll be back to say goodbye. That's it for Emma and I today. If you're watching on Peacock, and if you are, we will see you tomorrow. If you're not, stick around, because we're going to spend some time on Andrew Cuomo, I think, today. We should also say that the Senate has not only passed the $1 trillion infrastructure bill, the Cinema Portman bill, but the Senate just now voted 50 to 49 to advance the $3.5 trillion budget resolution, which is essentially the blueprint for the reconciliation package. And now we start the vote-a-rama, which could theoretically last until everybody poops out in the Senate. But so this is going to be and you're going to see like a wide array of amendments. Josh Hawley, I guess, already leaked a couple of the ones that he's going to do, which is basically spoiler alert, no critical race theory. That's going to be a biggie.
Writers got creative with that one.
And then there's also going to be things like we're not allowed to legislate universal pre-K. You know, Josh Hawley cares about the people.
Yeah, exactly. This guy we can partner with to take on the corporate state and the corporate libs is calling the infrastructure bill woke.
Here we go. Okay. Allow for the hiring of 100,000 new police officers to combat the growing violent crime wave in the United States. Incidentally, New York City, our violent crime is down dramatically. Bill de Blasio is having a good week.
Oh my God. He is probably
ban critical race theory. Josh Hawley is going to do in the federal workplace diversity training because he's of the people. prohibit legislation that establishes government-run universal pre-kindergarten and childcare. Now, that sounds like really scary, but in other words, you can only have private preschool, you cannot take the public school, elementary school down the block that has kindergarten, and you can't have those government-run bureaucrats extend it to pre-K. Because, of course, you know what happens. They make them all wear like Chairman Mao shirts at pre-K. Restrict federal funding for K through 12 schools because he is of the people that mandate COVID-19 vaccines for students, or mandate students wear masks, or do not resume in-person instruction because these people are so much about local control. But we will cover all of that later. All right. Just a reminder, your support makes this show possible. Joining us for the fun has Nomi Const, joining us right now, who is going to tell you who's going to be on her show tomorrow night, if she knows.
I can preempt her while she's joining.
Please do. I am sorry. You should have jumped in. I knew you were itching to let your North Dakota freak flag fly during that.
Well, no, I mean, Nick's work, I'm excited to read this one, but also the Code Access Pipeline book. I mean, it really informed the way I look at my hometown. And Bismarck Mandan is definitely one of those hometowns. You mentioned Sitting Bull. One of the first corporations that I know from my hometown, Mandan, North Dakota, is the Sitting Bull Log Cabin Company.
Oh, nice.
Which took Sitting Bull after he was assassinated, took his cabin around the upper Midwest, like Chicago and stuff, to just show it off. So here's where this guy lived. So.
Literally took it and
literally
like
took
on
his
tour
cabin and took it on tour. So that was one of the first businesses in my hometown.
And then what's their second bit? What do they do after that?
I don't know. I've actually been looking up sources. All I have is this old photograph. If you search Sitting Bull Log Cabin Company, you can see the guys in front of it.
Oh, that's nuts. And then what do they do? Build their own log cabins, or like based upon this guy that
I think it was just like if you go to like the World's Fair or whatever, you can go walk in Sitting Bull's cabin and see what it was like to be in there. Just really grotesque.
Really nuts.
You're from Mandan, like where the Dakota Access Pipeline was, where all the protests were? I've been there. Wow. I didn't know that. Damn.
Wow.
So yeah, but I'll just plug Left Reckoning real quick. Not Literary Hangover. There's nothing new there. But Left Reckoning, Corey Pine and David Griscom and I had a really good conversation about UFOs and what's going on there. Where I tell why I left the skeptic community for the leftist community, sort of online the last 10 years. Also, we talk about the far right and how we should probably still be worrying about them coordinating with the police more than them getting entrapped by the police. So patreon.com/Left Reckoning to get that conversation.
Wait, I have a question. You left the skeptic community about UFOs?
No, it was mainly over there in curiousness about the JFK assassination, right?
Okay.
That was it, really.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought there was a skeptic UFO community and a leftist UFO community.
There's not. Well, I guess the Posadists are sort of the leftist UFO community, but I'm not really.
But that's not what you were talking about.
No.
That was a conversation that was not necessarily associated with UFO.
Well, you were saying that it was because their concerns had no curiousness about earthly or monetary.
Skeptics like to do technical debunking. So, for instance, it puts them in a bad situation. Say, for instance, with climate change, because that's not about the technical facts of the matter. That's about politics and everything surrounding that. And skeptics have a blind spot when it comes to that. I think it's also evident in the JFK assassination. And probably in UFOs, even though I don't really believe that aliens are visiting us.
Where is it evident in the JFK assassination? I feel like
JFK is all focused on Dealey Plaza and trajectories and bullets and this. If and absolutely zero curiosity about the
forces that might be interested in what he was doing.
Yeah, Lee Harvey Oswald's all his military and sort of connections that make him obviously look like a spy or some kind of asset for somebody. The skeptics don't even address that. It's just it doesn't exist.
Right. Nomi.
What's up?
Every time we see you, your background has changed in some way.
I'm just a traveling TV host. I don't know what I am.
Travel with that big behind you.
You know what it has to do with the sunlight. That's what it has to do with. Most you know, it's like 8 o'clock here at night. And so the sun is starting to set like a little bit earlier. And normally I have a lot more daylight. That's the jam.
Well,
And the light that I brought all the way across the globe burned out because of one of those little cables, you know, the things that you have to connect it to. It totally blasted out. And so my lighting's not the best, I'm not gonna lie.
Converter.
Yeah, converters have killed me. It also like killed my phone.
What? Who's going to be on your show tomorrow night?
Well, we're gonna have to change some things probably rapidly, but we're gonna keep these guests. We're not leaving them out. We have Shahid Buttar on, and we also have Harvey K who comes on every month. But given the Cuomo news, I'm probably gonna shift some things very quickly. We were already gonna do it, but my bet was always he was always gonna step down by Wednesday morning. So I got close, very close. Yeah, that was my bet. I had a bet going with some people. I won the bet, by the way. I made some money. So listen, Cuomo may have come after me and threatened my life, all sorts of horrible things in my life. So many others have gone through it, but at least I made a little bit of money in the last couple of days off of his demise. Which I don't wish for many people, but for Cuomo, I feel like,
Oh yeah.
Well, let's take a quick break, and when you come back, we will talk more about Andrew Cuomo.
You are in for it.
All right, folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Alpha males are back. Boys back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boys back. And the alpha males are back.
Just want to degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Snowflake says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
Oh no, Sam Seder! What a fucking nightmare!
Bring back DJ.
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Denner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense. See white people doing drugs, they look worse than normal white people, and all white people look disgusting.
And the alpha males,
psych, fuck them. Oh.
Snowflake says what? Snowflake says what?
A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. Okay, I'm making stupid money. Hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. All lives matter.
Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black African. And the alpha males are black. And the Africans are back.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keeping it 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on, fuck 'em. Things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday. Happy birthday to me, Jew boy.
I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are black. Africans are back.
Come on. Come on. Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
Welcome back. We're back to the fun half, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to be taking your IMs. A lot of news going on, not the least of which is Andrew Cuomo resigning. But we should also say, like, you know, the infrastructure bill stuff is all happening right now too. But let's talk Cuomo. And I was just saying that my sense was that he was going to resign the moment it became clear that impeachment was definitely going to start, because the impeachment process in New York State, different than the federal one. He was going to get impeached in the assembly, it seemed to me, that it's just, there's not enough transactional leverage. He can't give enough to any one individual to make them not impeach him at this point, it seemed to me, in the assembly. And if you get impeached in New York in the assembly, instead of like, it doesn't go through until you get convicted in the Senate, you actually step down while the trial goes on in the Senate. And it just seems to me that once you step down, you're destroyed.
Are you saying, Sam, that he just wasn't overcome with his love of New York? Because New York tough means New York love.
I'm
New
saying,
York
actually,
saccharine
he
nonsense.
wasn't New York tough. It wasn't that he didn't have the love. He did have the love. He didn't have the tough.
But I was told the tough was the love. So.
No, you were told that the love was the tough.
You guys are so anti-Italian.
Didn't tell you.
What is this? Stop mocking the Italians.
No, I'm mocking him. I'm mocking him.
I know. When you mock him, you're mocking every hard-working Italian in New York. Listen, Columbus deserves to have a statue. He's a hero.
When you attack Andrew Cuomo, you're not just attacking the Italian people, because he's also black. He's Jewish.
A Muslim, a woman.
He's a lesbian. He's a gay man. He's a child.
On both kinds of
that video. Do we have that video? Can we pull that video?
Pull up this
It's
stuff.
so good. It's the best video. It's the best. Andrew Cuomo's got a lot of moments. That is my ringtone.
When I fondle people, I don't just fondle state troopers.
Yeah.
I fondle black people. I fondle white people. I fondle men, women, gay, straight,
monogamous, polyamorous.
I make out with Al Gore. I do Eskimo kisses with Bill Clinton. Madeleine Albright and I had a threesome. No big deal.
Hold on, here we go. Let's play this.
As a New Yorker, I am a Muslim. As a New Yorker, I am Jewish. As a New Yorker, I am black. I am gay. I am disabled. I am a woman seeking to control her health and her choices, because as a New Yorker, we are one community.
I am a woman seeking to squirm away from my open lips.
I am a woman who doesn't like pain.
I'm also state troopers. I'm a state trooper. I'm working on my own security detail. So really, I'm not harassing anybody if I'm doing it to myself.
It's called self-love.
It's exactly. Are we really going to be anti-masturbation now?
Yes,
I mean,
please.
come on.
They're going to impeach the man for masturbating? They're going to impeach the man for giving himself a reach around.
Jesus. Emma, it took that a little further than I wanted to go with that.
Guys, I don't want to think about this.
I was holding off on the reach around.
Can we get
Anywho.
resigning in 2 weeks? Because we get 2 more weeks of this.
So here's the crazy thing. I think, like, just to make it a little more serious, sorry, I know we could laugh about this, but I think, like, what we have to keep in mind here, he didn't have as much leverage as he did during the budget crisis. So one of the things that I think the legislature, the leverage that they had, you know, other than most of them hating him or feeling beholden to him, is that the budget was his leverage, and he used as much as he could up until the end in June. They got what they wanted.
We got to explain this to people, because I don't think they're following. Well, it would
There's
be
just so much happening. I just need to get it all out. It's just all here, ready to go. Poof.
Cuomo could have come out. Now, maybe the Assembly and the Senate is not ready for this, but Cuomo could have come out and said, I am a black person. I am a white person. I am a man. I'm a woman. I'm Jewish. I am Muslim. I am disabled. I am trying to control sovereignty of my own body. What would people say if I was interested in signing Medicare for all? Anybody interested? I mean, that's basically what happened, right? With the budget, he had something to give to a bunch of people. And I wouldn't say that he was rolled, but he was a lot more cooperative because he was on his back, on his heels. And there wasn't an instance like that where people could come and like trade their vote or trade his signature or whatever it was for them not pursuing him.
But also, it wasn't just that he had things. I think what the budget process, and maybe this is what we do moving forward, is for those of us who are interested in like the nuances of New York State legislature, what it is, what it actually exposed who he was bartering with, all of the people that we thought were beholden to Cuomo were actually, they were the ones, not the leftists, which is also very important because none of it would have happened if the IDC had not been defeated. None of this, let's make this very, very clear. None of this would have happened if the IDC were never defeated, meaning the Independent Democratic Conference that made the Senate Democratic. It gave the Assembly leverage, and the Assembly is not as progressive as the Senate. And the Senate, by the way, is not that progressive either. But what it did was it exposed who was actually bartering with Cuomo and who was not actually loyal to him, because those were the ones he needed to, because they are on the fence. They're sitting there, when Cuomo was in control, they sided with Cuomo. But now that he's out of control, they realized, okay, maybe he's not he's not going to be in power, and we have to actually be beholden to the Senate leadership or the Assembly leadership. And so it showed everybody's true colors, who was a centrist, who's center left, who's an actual leftist, who actually believes in Medicare for all, because we did have that bill. We do have a bill. Right. And guess what? A bunch of folks who said that they were for Medicare for all, when budget time came, guess what? Yep. They weren't.
All right, so let's talk about Kathy Hochul. A fluky rise to the top of not a tremendous amount of political experience.
No, that's not true. She's comptroller. She was a congresswoman. She was comptroller. She has political experience.
Okay.
She had more than Andrew Cuomo did.
I guess there you have it. So, all right. So what is she? I mean, what role is she going to play here? She doesn't have necessarily the network. I mean, she's sort of, been lieutenant governor in the shadow of Andrew Cuomo. Hard to build, I would imagine, your own sort of political network, when he's bigfooting all the time. Is she going to veto? I mean, what are we going to see? Is it just like a caretaker governorship? I mean, what happens?
So my take on this is, because of the political dynamics of New York State right now and the legislature and the left, there are more and more members of the Assembly that either ran as Democratic Socialists or leftists, or those who realize the tides are turning and they're starting to move a little bit more left in the Senate and in the Assembly. She has to kind of be so sophisticated that she can balance this out. But keep in mind, there's an election next year. So, the question is, number one, is Kathy Hochul going to run again? Does she find herself in a position, and she probably will, where she feels strong enough to run again? But simultaneously, all the money, I mean, I read this article in the Buffalo News, where she's from and where I grew up. She, the chair of the Democratic Party, so crazy, was quoted in the Buffalo News saying, grandstanding, like, and we really helped her raise all this money, because she raised more money than Tish James, who is arguably the Attorney General, the front runner. And she is in polls, but not by a lot, the front runner for who's going to run and probably clear the field if, at least anybody to the left of Tish James would not run against Tish James. But Kathy Hochul raised more money in the last few months, but they were all Andrew Cuomo's money. And so the chairman of the Democratic Party in Western New York, Erie County, said, oh, and we helped do it. And then this is important, the Buffalo News reporter said, actually, no money came from Buffalo, New York. Very important, because if she's going to have a political operation, it's going to come from where she came up from.
Right.
And she raised zero money from Western New York. So essentially, I think she doesn't have enough time to build the political dynamics and pull the levers to create the kind of machine she needs to create at a time when there's such division, where the left is really growing and the centrists are in collapse. She's politically very weak. She has a lot of money. She's going to inherit a lot of Andrew Cuomo's real estate, charter school money and support, but she's not the same. He had long relationships, he had favors, et cetera, and she doesn't. So I think she's in a weaker political position, and especially with the threat of Tish James potentially running. And they're probably going to use Tom Suozzi, who's a congressman out of Long Island, who doesn't care. He's part of the Problem Solvers Caucus, one of those guys. He's probably going to run to the right of Tish James if Hochul doesn't. I'm not sure, but the question is, where does big money go? And is the person that they back strong enough?
And he's a pretty. There was a Justice Democrat that ran against him.
Not a Justice Democrat. Melanie DeRigo. She was a major candidate. She's not a Justice Democrat. Yeah.
Okay. Oh yeah. She was at least a progressive, right? And yes. I remember his fundraising apparatus being quite substantial with because it's on the North Shore, Long Island. Some significant money there, if I'm not mistaken.
He is a former state senator. He is extremely conservative as a Democrat. His district overlaps a little bit with Queens. He's Western Long Island, Northwestern Long Island, and he's part of the Problem Solvers Caucus, which is a caucus in which they take votes in secret, and then they don't announce afterwards when he decides I'm voting with the Problem Solvers. I'm sorry, we lost our vote. Well, all of them voted. It's all Republicans. It's secret.
It's labels, more or less. All right. Well, we'll have plenty of time to talk about this. I mean, and maybe we should even do one of those countdown things, that they do, day
advent calendar of Cuomo resigns.
Exactly.
Oh my God! If we had enough time, I would totally sell that.
New York held hostage for a day.
What's going to happen?
Each day dedicated to one of his gender or racial identities.
Exactly.
What about Chris Cuomo? What do we think is going to happen with him?
Well, I would not be surprised to see the two of them maybe start a podcast together or a YouTube channel, or maybe Andrew Cuomo goes on CNN. I mean, Chris Cuomo's, got to breathe a sigh of relief, I think, at this point, because he's okay, now my career gets to shine. I no longer have to, tiptoe around what my brother's doing, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, because it was starting to get ridiculous. I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, I'm sorry.
And I can't imagine he likes his brother. His brother's probably the biggest asshole to him ever.
Oh no, I think he really looks up to his brother. I think his brother was sort of a father figure to him. Is my understanding.
Well, I mean, he was helping him with messaging on the sexual harassment stuff, but I just can't imagine anyone liking that guy, let alone somebody who you feel like if you're in his shadow, might be difficult.
I think they had a strained relationship with the dad. That's my sense. I just remember when it was, I can't remember if it was Andrew's birthday, 50th or 60th birthday, and they asked Mario for a video, and it somehow it leaked out publicly that Mario said, no, not gonna
I remember
not gonna
Wayne.
Happy birthday, son thing. Fuck it.
But how much of that was just Mario Cuomo not? So I remember Wayne Barrett, who was this, we've talked about him on the show before, iconic investigative reporter. He said to me, we were working on this investigative fund together, focusing on New York State politics. And I remember we were doing this investigation of the Moreland Commission, the person who was leading it. And the Moreland Commission was the anti-corruption commission that Andrew Cuomo ran on and then shut down as soon as they started looking into his office, which later led to his entire circle of trust going to jail, blah, blah, blah. But Wayne Barrett said to me, and he was in his late 70s.
That was him just being a girl boss.
Exactly. I'm a woman boss. So he said to me, what's different about Andrew than Mario? And I said, what? I'm fascinated because their personalities are just so different. And he said, Andrew was raised by his mother's grandparents. And that is, and again, this is from Wayne Barrett, said they were the mob. He was raised by them. His father was governor. His father was busy. And he inherited the personality traits and the power dynamics in a way that Mario he didn't operate that way. He wasn't perfect, but his personality was just not like that.
Wasn't a mobster.
And Andrew had that job for his father. I mean, he was the tough consigliere in some way. That was
he was like in his 20s. He was his campaign manager when he ran for mayor.
Yep.
Hated Koch. Remember the famous line about Koch?
Oh yeah, what was it? It was basically a homophobic slur, right? It wasn't it. Oh yeah, Cuomo, not the yeah.
Cuomo, not the homo.
There you go.
Yeah. Wonderful. And then Cynthia Nixon said, "Homo, not the Cuomo."
Yes. Well, we guys, we can't speaking of political dynasties, we can't discount Andrew Giuliani's run for governor.
I so hope he runs for governor. This is going to be.
He is already.
It's a great opportunity for Andrew Giuliani.
He is.
Time to shine. Time to shine.
His name is Andrew on top of it. Come on, not another Andrew.
I'm not terribly worried about his prospects, to be honest. I got to be honest. I'm a little skeptical. All right, let's read some IMs and then let's play some clips. Oh, we should also just, we got to catch up on what's going on with the infrastructure bill too in a second. But how are you? Sam, you decrepit dumbass. Holy Christ, do you look like shit these days? Are those your eyebrows or do you have some weird disease where your body grows a mustache above each eye? Anyway, love the show and wanted to yet again remind you, get Fran Lebowitz on the show. I feel like Fran Lebowitz is like a fall guest, not a summer guest. Nerd Cheetah. There doesn't seem to be anyone in the mainstream media calling out either Democrats or Republicans on the hands-off personal choice and responsibility narratives regarding COVID masks gathering in public schools. Even Jake Tapper knows that it's really all the choice you can afford. And some can choose shelter in place with their loved ones while paying those who have little or no choice to deliver whatever their pampered, choosy ass desires. Seem comfortable saying we won't see much politically from Andrew Cuomo going forward. You might be lowballing how disgusting and corrupt Democrats are. That was at 12:24. I've got some bad news for you, Nerd Cheetah. It seems you were wrong. But fair enough. But yes, I mean, I don't think there should be a personal choice and responsibility narrative regarding COVID masks. I think we should go back to masks in public places, particularly until we find out exactly what the implications are with Delta. I mean, that's more or less that way I've been operating myself, but I think that we should have never lifted the mask stuff because it's a pandemic and it's a new pathogen. You just don't know enough about any of it.
What I don't understand is like, they knew this, just like, I mean, with all due respect to the Biden administration, who really has been pushing the vaccines as much as they can against, disinformation and, with the Fauci attacks, they knew the Delta variant was spreading when they decided to lift the mask mandate. They knew that there were, I don't understand.
Well, I think they just, they were making a bet. And the problem is that there's we never bothered to set up the apparatus to track this stuff. I mean, it all throughout the Trump administration, there was not the proper reporting systems. And so you really can't, and then I think the Biden administration just was like, this is, I mean, fortunately for them, I think like on some level, they didn't get to the 70% vaccination rate, by July 4th, because they would have had they would have unfurled that mission accomplished banner. I mean, because that I think was definitely the mentality. It was just like, we're going to get this behind us. And, the problem is that we live in a country that is, I mean, they've had this problem everywhere else. I mean, maybe, so it's not just United States, but particularly here, it's just sort of like, there's no nuance to any of this. There's no reasonable, this is that like Jimmy Carter comes out and says, we need to put solar panels on the White House and we need to wear sweaters to cut back for our oil consumption. And boom, he immediately becomes the worst president in the history of the United States because of that. I mean,
to be fair, you didn't need to wear sweaters to cut back on your oil consumption. So there was some But I mean, that ultimately comes down to, it's not a personal responsibility. It is a personal responsibility thing in this situation.
No,
simultaneously, the government needs to enforce
both situations, right? I mean, I agree. But my point is just like the idea of trying to like, say anything that has any type of honesty to the American public at times is, I don't know. It's lunacy. I'm back on my blame the voters tact. Peachy Keen read all about the business plot after hearing about it on yesterday's episode. Blows my mind, but also further cements proof that fascism has direct ties to capitalism. Sitting Bull's log cabin was featured at the 1893 World's Fair, reminiscent of the human zoos of the 19th and 20th century. True North politics, this Cuomo press conference is incredibly well done. What a team he has, but also pretty clearly a representation of what happened that makes Cuomo look the best. Are people going to buy this? I'm a little worried they will. That was a little premature. Tom from Kubia. Dude, who didn't cut your hair? I know it. I got to, I'm starting to think that maybe it could be time for a haircut, but I'm also thinking maybe not.
What? Because you just want to see how long it can go?
I mean, I haven't had my hair this long in, probably close to like 15, 16, 17 years, maybe more. So I don't know how much longer I'm going to have it.
I think you need highlights, Sam. Just join the game.
Mm-hmm.
We should all just be blonde and wear glasses. Emma, you, me, Sam, wearing your glasses.
Cudlow's Trojan Lope. Don't worry about the climate. We got our money and Jesus is coming back soon. Almond Silk. All of these men have given, I didn't understand where the line is. I thought running my finger over her body was A-okay. I learned it from Daddy. It's always snowy in Ottawa. Jimmy Sore fans equal Greg was right supporters. Both can't stand women with a spine.
Yes, that's a Bachelorette reference.
Oh my God, I had no idea what that was talking about.
Down with Greg.
Can you bring someone on to talk about the state of California's investigation into Activision Blizzard, one of the most appalling cases of rampant sexual violence workplace-wide in modern times? While they're more video game and entertainment focused than most of your guests, Castle Super Beast podcast has followed this case and numerous other incidents of video game companies fostering sexual predators. Well, you know what this is a function of? Lack of ethics in gaming journalism.
Yeah, I want to look into this more. There's a headline: Activision Blizzard hires Bush-era torture apologist as chief compliance officer.
Who's that?
It was Frances Townsend.
Oh, Jesus. Yeah, she was CNN. She's horrible.
Yep.
That feels like a Left Reckoning episode, or maybe a literary hangover.
Yeah, I think that Left Reckoning, we might do something in the next couple of weeks.
Kid tested Politburo approved. So sad to see the intolerant left forcing Cuomo to cancel himself. Wondering if Greenwald will go on his YouTube show when it starts.
Oh, I found out just 20 hours later, he did another tweet about me.
What, man? He really...
Ignore.
I was going to bed and someone tagged me. Hey, just thought you might want to see this.
Wake up! Wake up! Glenn Greenwald's tweeting about you again.
I was like, actually, in fact, I don't want to, but...
I don't know. I really feel like when you ignore, even just a response to something can create outrage. I mean, I did something against her. I woke up in the morning because there's a 7-hour difference here to hundreds of retweets. I just think if you ignore, they go away. They feed off of this. They make money off of this. I know it's hard, but
yeah,
they have a different agenda, I'm
ignoring now for sure. I mean, I've gotten to that point. I don't care anymore.
Glenn seems...
Let's just be very clear. It's harassment. It's aggressive harassment.
Look.
I don't even.
The
go
bottom
that
line
far
is.
from...
I mean, the bottom line is that when you think about his, with all due respect to you and I, for that matter, his targets have really gotten diminished over the years. I mean, here's the guy who, Snowden sent him all of the some of the most high-level secrets of the NSA, and now he is going on He's
going through my old tweets and searching Tucker Carlson.
Honestly,
just to see
well,
if
it must be some sort of little greasy sort of group DM that they're all doing that onto. It's not. just
Oh
one doing
yeah, it's not. It's definitely not.
It's Telegram.
It's
just
not a
so
coincidence.
sad. Like
yeah.
at one point, when does a guy move on to like, you know, like, I don't know if you've seen this TikTok dance guy, but they're doing the worst music on this.
It's less profitable for him to go after like Hungary experts, for instance.
Right, right. Like
Suddenly
instead of
everyone's an
engaging,
expert.
No, Orban is a hero to him, of course.
instead of
Free
engaging,
speech.
engaging with like academics on Hungary, he's like, I'm policing the tweets of people on YouTube shows.
I'm sorry, is he censoring us? Is that what he's doing? Is this censorship?
Maybe.
Sideways Pelosi hand clap. Looks like you won't have Cuomo to kick around anymore. Emma's Pause, The Power of Love by Huey Lewis is Cuomo's jam. Fairchild, 2.5 Cuomos. Coming up with ideas here. Colin from Nebraska, Andrew Cuomo put the I Heart NY and put on the I Heart NYC shirt. His nipple piercings will not be missed. I want the him and Fredo all the other 9 anti-vaxxers on the street. Ad hominem. I hope Cynthia Nixon runs for governor's seat. Door knocker. How nice of Cuomo to announce his resignation on Tuesday so Nomiki can join on the dunking today. Tag team Cuomo's. Cuomo to run as a Republican in 2022? I don't think so. Marnix, eagerly awaiting the Cuomo is a no-mo headline. So that's pretty good. Chantel, did you watch Psaki dismissing Dr. Olstenholm's observation that the scientific community needs to take more responsibility for not educating public enough about cloth mask and surgical mask efficacy? People still don't know how ineffective is cloth masks are after 20 minutes. I mean, he mentioned that on this program about if you really want efficacy, you know, nothing less than a KN95. My understanding is like the KF94s are not bad either. You want like a 4 or 5 ply. And
what about double compared to that? Like if you do double, just the regular surgical mask, you double. Is that good?
I mean, here's the thing. There's no
And
like,
vaccine.
this is bad, this is good. It is just like some are better than others. If you have an N95 mask, this is what Osterholm told us. If you have an N95 mask and you're in a room with somebody else, I believe, who has an N95 mask, and you both have, one of you has COVID, you can stay in there for, 24 hours and you will not get it. And then it just goes down. And I think it was both, as opposed to the other person without. But the bottom line is, they're available now. Get a KN95 for when you go into situations where you have, people who you don't know, public spaces. I don't know that we'll go to masks in here, or we're going to put the plastic tarp back up at one point if that's going to happen. But, I have a vague sense of like how you guys live your lives on some level.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, who knows?
Can I just offer one thing? Like I think a couple of shows ago, I mentioned how I went through a little bit of a scare, and thank God I was negative, but we were taping out of somebody's space in which he developed COVID, even though he was vaccinated. He had Moderna, and his entire office was vaccinated, and half of the office ended up getting the Delta variant. So with that being said, they were in the office and they weren't wearing masks because they were all vaccinated, because it was that brief little window where we were all like, oh, it's good. And so half the office got the Delta variant, and it was a very, very light flu. He got over it within 3 or 4 days and he was good. Initially, he even was like, why did I get the vaccine? And I want to make this very clear for folks who are still kind of on the fence, even on the left, because I got some tweets about this. It was like a 4-day, like light flu, heavy cold. He was sick for a day and then got through it, whatever. With that being said, now the office is masked, and here, like, there's all these lockdowns on certain islands right now in different places where you have to be vaccinated to sit inside. To get on a ferry, you either have to show vaccination or a recent PCR test in the last 2 days. So if you add all these things together, if like everybody in the office is vaccinated, if people are masked on top of it, when they're vaccinated and going to a grocery store, it's just all these different factors make it less likely to spread. But I think But like the wild card is, of course, if you're not vaccinated.
Are they clear that it was a vaccinated person who transmitted it to everybody?
Yes. Everybody in the office was vaccinated. That was it's a UN funded operation. They work for a refugee company or organization. So everybody had to be vaccinated.
The concept is this. It's basically like, like polarized sunglasses or, the Swiss cheese, right? It's like, here's the first layer of protection. You can see that the things can pass through. And then here's a second layer of protection and it becomes smaller. And then you overlay a third layer of protection and a fourth layer of protection. And and you can include in that the vaccine. Is one more layer of protection, maybe not necessarily to prevent you from catching it, but to diminish the severity of it. I mean, the idea is...
And when it's severe, when you're showing your symptoms, so the symptoms, even though, yes, a vaccinated person can spread the virus, the symptoms are way less. And the stronger your symptoms are, the more likely you are to pass it on. So if there's one unvaccinated person in the room who has COVID and they're displaying symptoms, they're more likely to spread it to whoever is around them. So that is why it's so important to get your vaccination.
Right. Fierce deity. So sad to see him go as governor, but his appearance on Chris Cuomo were the funniest parts of COVID. And I can't wait for their new show, Randy Rainbow, probably. The Psycho File. Speaking to what Emma said about Cuomo being a Democratic Trump, I think they simply have the same type of personality. Trump, of course, is much more unhealthy, but I think their motivations and insecurities are very similar. USA to China. Can I get a solidarity for Allie? Heart transplant at age 3, beat stage cancer at stage 2 cancer at 21, and now her heart is about to fail again at 28.
Oh,
horrible. Robo Gorka. Matt, did you watch the new Timba on Toast video? Sam, you should really take time to watch this one.
No, but I am going to watch it tonight. Timba on Toast, who did the 3-part Dave Rubin documentary and also a really good Project Veritas documentary, just released a long Tim Pool breakdown. He's one of the best in the big. Timba on Toast, Timbah.
Oh, wow. I got to check that out. All right, let's, should we check out?
We got to do Hemmer.
All right, let's do Hemmer, and then we'll do this Michael Lindell thing.
I'm sending in samples now.
That is pretty good.
Damn it. Yeah.
All right, let's, this is interesting. Bill Hemmer, Dana Perino on Fox Tuesday. Bill Hemmer waxing nostalgic about his trip to Germany about 20 years ago that he took.
Primetime television.
Hemmer at times has occurred to me that he strikes me sometimes as a guy you might bump into at, let's say, a bar. And a guy who might bump into a bar at, like, 2 in the afternoon. And he's been there. Supposedly on his lunch break that starts at 11:30. But here is Bill Hemmer on Fox News.
Check out his podcast, What the Hell is Going On with Critical Race Theory. It's very good, very informative.
Pause it for 1 second, just as an appetizer. They had that guy Mark Thyssen on, who's the right-winger who has an opinion column in the Washington Post. He was also, I think, a Bush administration flack of some sort, if I remember correctly. And of course, he was writing about the big news of the day as the $1 trillion infrastructure bill is about to pass, and then the $3.5 trillion budget resolution is about to. He's writing about the big news of the day, which of course is the potential for critical race studies to be taught to your preschoolers. But here is that clip.
His podcast, What the Hell is Going On with Critical Race Theory. It was very good, very informative. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mark. On the Princeton point here, you and I have discussed it at the college level. This is fair game. Go ahead and do it, right? I mean, I remember 20 years old going to Trier, Germany, and trying to find the home of Karl Marx because, 1848, he wrote Mein Kampf. I want to know what it was all about. So that's part of the education in America, if you so choose. So that's that. More to come. Green Mile.
Part of the education of America. He adds that line.
Dana's like,
let's look at her
Dana's
face.
like, I was a spokesperson at a White House. What is this?
And so his argument is like, college, everything's fair game. You gotta learn them about the.
They
Mein
corrected
Kampf.
it next segment, by the way. He misspoke.
He came back. He misspoke. But you know what's even fascinating about that is not just that. Obviously, I mean, he was talking about. Did he come back and say we were talking about the Communist Manifesto?
He said later on the program, he said, I misspoke. 1848, Karl Marx, the Communist Manifesto. But like, what's funny about it to me is that they just have all of these evil objects and ideas just in that brain, right, that they're supposed to hit. And he had a wire crossed in the Fox News robot programming, and thus he got it wrong.
Yeah.
He got it wrong.
What would have been amazing is if Hitler had written in 1948. That would have been incredibly
1848.
impressive.
1848.
48? Oh, sorry.
You're doing it.
I mean, this reminds me of
It's
when
contagious.
I was in Sardinia, and I
Even
was looking for Gramsci's house because I wanted to see what led to the Unabomber manifesto.
It is just fascinating that he's got this all in a one bin, and we're just going to pull something out that's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
There was this guy named Rob Port who's like a North Dakota sort of right-wing blogger, and he went to the White House for a tour, and he made national news because he took a picture of, I think Das Kapital was in the White House library or something like that, and he's like, the Obamas put Das Kapital in the White House library, and it's been there since like the 90s.
Right.
Well, it would be even funnier if he he claimed on air that Obama wrote Das Kapital.
Let's do the correction.
Childhood, but Judge Mark Wyndham told him to back off, that he'd have a chance later to cross-examine Durst on Berman's murder.
Wow, what a case. Thank you, William. We'll see where that goes. William Langeness there in L.A. Watch that trial here. I misspoke. 1848, Karl Marx, Communist Manifesto. All right.
And off he went.
I shall.
Not Mein Kampf.
If he wrote Mein Kampf in a different year or something.
Right. That's what he says. They're really hitting the date. 1848 is when he wrote the Communist Manifesto. He, of course, wrote Mein Kampf much, much later.
But he got the date right on the Communist Manifesto. I mean, that's what I'm saying. Though.
Right.
He is like a Aryan Fox News robot meant to just pluck out things from the big
horrors.
the cauldron of bad things that they
I'm trying to
keep
think what
stewing
other
at
thing
Fox.
would be in that cauldron.
Critical race theory.
I'm of the theory that this was conspiracy because he's like one of the like legitimate newsy people, right? He's not one of the he's not Hannity, he's not Tucker, he's not Laura Ingraham. He's in the news hour, so he never goes like political, right? I think this is like the ghost of Roger Ailes being like, this is the subtle. This is why you say Barack Hussein Obama. You will lose your job if you don't say it.
He does go a little bit political, though. Hammer does at times.
We all do, of course.
He's a newsy journalist, but he's also a boozy journalist.
Oh man.
He remembers 1941 when 9/11 happened. All right, let's. It didn't come across like I wanted to drop.
I got it.
All right. It can't all be.
You don't need to be sad about it.
I mean, it can't all be gems. Let's go to Boomer Socialist. It's nice that Cuomo gave 2 weeks notice. That's pretty good. Yado, Sam's hair is very poggers today. Wow, the people making a big.
It's pretty nuts today.
I should have brushed my hair a little bit more. Your left testicle, native here. As a teenager, everyone here had a joke about me not being real because natives don't exist anymore. It was hurtful. Basically, they were acknowledging that they knew my heritage, had no respect or concern for it, and were eager to rub my face in the genocide of my ancestors. And I should be clear, this just wasn't just white people. In fact, it was mostly other people of color. Will from Indiana. I stand corrected when literally 1 week ago I said the Cuomo-sexuals are having a rough day. The levels of copium are so high, they'll be staring at those photos he voluntarily put up for weeks. He and Chris are going to start a 90s themed hip hop duo called Italian Power Trip. It'll have features from New York sports legends like Kristaps Porzingis, Tony D'Angelo, Matt Dodge, Elfrid Payton, Jared Porter, and Mickey Callaway. You're welcome, Emma.
This is a personal attack.
Oh, I really appreciated the Elfrid Payton slander.
Cowboys' butts drive me nuts. Please take the call from Casey calling from 828 Discord gang. Not taking phone calls today. We'll do it tomorrow. Das Capitol Hill. Native Americans are killed in police encounters at a higher rate than any other racial or ethnic group.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know, but like alongside the Black Power movement, there was the American Indian movement that was sparked also because of a police killing in Minneapolis.
Emma's Malark. Classic lefties making lists. Oliver Wendell home slice. Emma, now that the NFL is going to cause teams to forfeit games for spreading COVID, is this going to be a watershed moment? I could easily see hardcore conservative Texan like Jerry Jones going public and becoming vehemently pro-mask and pro-vaccine to protect his bottom line. Same with the other NFL owners who ultimately care more about money than politics. It just feels like one by one, the bastions of COVID irresponsibility are falling slowly but steadily.
Well, it's not. What's really fascinating about that entire dynamic is that all of the owners seem to be on board with the vaccine mandates, because if games are forfeited, then that means that game isn't played and the owners don't get money from the ticket sales, because stadiums are going to be open and you have to be, I don't think actually there are any restrictions. It varies state by state. But mostly what you're seeing is on a player level, there's this, there's a high vaccine rate amongst players. I think it's maybe 80%, but they're a very vocal 20% led by Cole Beasley and Kirk Cousins and others. So I don't think that they would have agreed to this because this was a part of a CBA negotiation by the players union. And then that goes through Goodell, who gets the approval of the 32 owners. So I think there actually was, an understanding that this was better for their bottom line. But the players, it's a whole different situation. Some of them are being nuts about it. Last thing about it, what's crazy to me is Kirk Cousins, a quarterback. We talked about this. You'll find this funny, Sam. The quarterback for the Vikings said, he won't get vaccinated. He says it's a personal and private choice, but he says, I'll do everything I can not to contract COVID after there was a scare. He said, I'll build a plexiglass structure around me in the quarterback room so that I can be isolated, but I'll do everything I can. No, you won't. You won't get vaccinated.
Bubble boy,
He's just like terrified of the vaccine is what it's got to be.
His dad's an evangelical preacher type. But unfortunately, the even I don't think Lamar Jackson's vaccinated. Players I like, I don't think Cam Newton's vaccinated. Bummer.
Let's play this clip from Mike Lindell, who. It's amazing how this hardworking American is out there trying to spread the word about the election, the stolen election, and nobody listens to him.
He's going to filibuster. He's going to stand up and say his piece for days and days on end, right? He won't rest. He might not even be able to rest.
What drives? Yeah,
given
I have a feeling he has much trouble.
Chemicals. Yeah. He might have trouble falling asleep.
Let's listen to Mike Lindell. Where is he located?
South Dakota.
He's in South Dakota. Is this like a Sturgis adjacent? He's on OWN, and he's doing a cyber symposium. And he listen, folks, you're going to hear what he has to say because he is not going away.
All morning, not one of them had watched it, but it went on till about 12:30. And you hear this really bad one because she's always trying to overtalk me, goes right to the story.
Oh my God! Promo code War Room.
Wow. Look at Steve Bannon calling in. Why didn't he join in person?
Bannon's there. I just feel like if you are talking
maybe he is there, I don't know,
about the theft of an election and you want people to take you totally seriously, just say for this one time, I'm going up there, no promo code for a discount on the MyPillow. Like, I just feel like you're sending mixed messages. This is important. This is the most important thing ever, except for the discount code.
This event is it's at the South Dakota Military Alliance venue. The event is by invitation only for cyber experts, politicians, and the media.
Jeez.
Which is,
man, I would hate to be a cyber expert and show up there and go like, oh, Jesus, I got hoodwinked into
I
this.
didn't read the flyer right.
Well, what? Oh, wait, is there a coupon for a pillow? All right, go ahead.
See, it goes right to the story. As long as we're talking about this, Dominion just filed a lawsuit against Newsmax, OAN, and Patrick Byrne. This is what we're going to go through today, everybody. God bless them. Let me tell you something, Dominion. Guess what? After today, you better melt down those machines and use them for prison bars. That's true. That's true. It's true.
You can do it. It's true.
And if you're out there now and you're there, you should turn yourself in right now. And because the first ones that do will probably have, maybe they get airtime where they're in prison. Anyway, so this goes on to this gal.
Wait, what's going
that's
on?
not
What?
That's not the right clip.
That's not the right clip.
Still hilarious.
But he's still talking.
No,
at
the one
this-
I sent. The one I sent. Okay.
Here it is. And also,
They attacked me.
Pause it 1 second. So, I mean, the guy goes on. He's talking, he's standing up. First of all, I don't know what's going on with his legs.
I was just about to say, all right, I'm sorry, Bradley.
Can we go back to the other one,
We have
please?
to
We're
go
gonna
back
replay
to
that.
like 10 seconds in.
Because I can't tell, like...
He does like a leg twitch.
No, he's doing it throughout the whole thing. Go to the beginning of it, because it's like, I noticed this, like, this is like one of those situations where I would say to my son, like, hey, dude, you got to go to the bathroom?
All morning. Not one of them had watched it. But it went on till about 12:30. And hear this really bad one, because she's always trying to overtalk me. Goes right to the story. And see, it goes right to the story. As long as we're talking about this.
the one.
Dominion just...
A little bit. That one is so...
See, it goes right to the story. As long as we're talking about this.
I'm dancing, man.
Dominion just filed a lawsuit against Newsmax, OAN, and Patrick Byrne. This is what we're going to go through.
Yeah, they must be pretty excited to be playing that on OAN right now as they're filing that lawsuit, and they're saying, and first off, Lindell doesn't seem to know how prisons work. Why would you melt down your own stuff to create your own bars?
Also, why would you say, I'm suggesting this, and then it's true?
There you go. It's
because
definitely true.
That's...
All right, let's see this other clip here. He's really getting, like, he apparently, like, went on and spoke for a very long time.
Mm-hmm. He's bringing restless leg syndrome, like a
They
whole...
attacked me. They buried it. You think about that.
What? They got something they want to show you off stage here.
Okay, I guess we have something off stage. So we're live streaming though. So you want to talk?
Well, I think we're set up for a break, and then maybe we're going to talk a little bit right when we get back there. We're going to go into...
No, we're not going on a break. Put up that movie again. Run the movie. There's no breaks. We're streaming 72 hours live streaming. So around the world, this never stops. You guys can go eat. That's fine. But I ain't eating. I'm staying up here for 72 hours before they ruin our signal. Go with the movie.
Ruin our signal.
Ladies and gentlemen, lunch is now available in the back hallway. Thank you.
Yeah. We're going to put the movie up again. If everybody missed it, I want to go put the movie up.
Tabulation system.
And then when we come back from the movie, we're going to have Dr. Frank stream, he's going to get on there and do his presentation. So is the movie going?
Came together because they
you guys, this is the movie y'all heard about this morning. With this movie...
Oh my God.
And Justin Baragona of the Daily Beast writes underneath that, needless to say, Lindell walked off stage a few minutes later.
Does he not have a family?
Yeah, I think... Why does he have no appetite?
I mean, I hope they don't have like Lauren Boebert's...
He doesn't get hungry. He doesn't get hungry. Lindell does not get hungry. No. Coupon code. Don't worry, I don't eat. I'm getting my energy from somewhere else.
Oh man. I guess that wasn't wasn't his persuasion. It was the.
Who knows? Who knows?
I'm not saying now.
Who knows what where all that energy comes from? That's
Imagine who they're having cater that. I mean,
Applebee's.
I was gonna say like Lauren Boebert's pork sliders, but
all meat.
Black Rifle Coffee. Black Rifle Coffees.
Obviously.
Let's play Brett Baer mocking the climate
I'm sorry.
change.
Just tee that up one more time. But do you guys remember the rumor that Mike Lindell had a girlfriend? I just remembered that, and it was Jane Krakowski from.
He was like, "What are you doing?
Like, this is not true." And I remember I was like, "I love that show." Sorry, but do you think he leaked that himself?
I don't know.
Poor Jane Krakowski. She's like, "What are you doing to me?" Guys, I just want you to know, John Hamm and I are having an affair. Just let you know that. Forcing him to comment.
I'm sorry, Sam. I really cut you off, but I just thought about that
No,
again.
that's funny. I don't know what was going on with that. It's so hard to sort of assess what's happening with that guy. Mike, you're the last guy. You're my last guy. Last guy here. He's holding his own symposium on cybersecurity. I mean, the guy is committed.
He should be committed.
He should be.
In two separate ways.
All right, let's play this. What should we do? The Brett Baer one, or I mean, what's that? Let's do this Brett Baer one because I mean, the lost in all of this is just like there's this Washington Post story about the. I don't understand it exactly, but essentially there is a cycle of sorts that involves the Gulf Stream as it crosses as it comes up from the Gulf and crosses the Atlantic. There's certain heat in the water. It changes, and when it is got salt in it still and hasn't evaporated, it will sink. And the water temperatures are in this sort of delicate balance that have to do with water that comes from the south up to the north. And apparently scientists are now becoming alarmed because they are seeing indications. It's very hard to measure, but they're seeing indications apparently that suggest that it could be, they've anticipated that this could get screwed up in 300 years. But now they're starting to see indications that maybe it's terminal right now. This cycle, essentially. And this cycle, if it ends, is not something that repairs. Because it's sort of like a self-perpetuating, there's a certain amount of inertia, I guess, in the way that this functions. And could leave Europe just incredibly frigid in the winters. I mean, just like unbearably frigid. This on top of, I think it's part of some of the report from the IPCC that suggests that things are speeding up faster than we had anticipated. And yet, here's Brett Baer reporting it on Fox. Remember, I mean, the Republicans are the only major party in the world, political party, that deny climate change. I don't know where they are on their trajectory of denial right now, whether it's sort of like, well, it's happening, but it's not man-made, or it's happening and it's man-made, but we can't do anything about it. I'm not sure. But here is Brett Baer.
Tonight, a United Nations report says the Earth is getting hotter than even most scientists predicted at this point, and that it is definitely the fault of humans. That's what the report says. This occurs as extreme weather around the planet sparks alarm throughout the global warming community. We'll talk live with the Energy Secretary Jennifer Granholm in just a moment. First with the story, here's correspondent Benjamin Hall.
Well, just the global warming community.
AKA. everyone but the people not getting vaccines.
Right.
I would like to see that overlap. Like, where's the vaccine denial? And I know there is like there's a little sliver that is leftist and, you know, anti-pharmaceutical, whatever. But I would like to know what the overlap is, because that is the future of the political right, in my opinion, that base.
And even if it's not, I mean, that's what's so disturbing, though, in terms of like our prospects for addressing this. Because if you can't convince people that you should just wear a mask during a pandemic, how do you convince people that something that they can't see the totality of, or even remotely close to it, how do you convince them to, you know, that we as a society need to do something? It just terrifies me.
I went on this tour like last week, the antiquities in Greece, and I had this expert. He's actually a philosopher, which I guess you can get a degree in Greece and actually have a job, you know, doing. But it's always been this way. There's always been, you can't convince. I mean, this is I think the problem with Democrats and progressives. We want to convince everybody. We remember, I mean, there's always going to be a faction that sinks democracy or whatever semblance of democracy we have, a republic. There's always going to be a faction that's just going to take us down. The question is, what do we do with that faction? How do we make sure the power's moving so that they're not holding us hostage to our own I mean, it's our demise is really coming down to that. It's a small faction Hungary that put Orban in place and divided, you know, the left there, divided the left in France right now, the anti-vax protests, the Le Pen protests that are, and the left divided there, left divided in UK, like we could go on and on and on and on. This is not the time for the left to be debating over whether or not we should have a French commune or not. It's how do we deal with this extremely vocal, powerful minority that is completely allergic to any sort of logic and always has been throughout history. What do we do with that?
Yeah, and what's fascinating to me about the through lines of like that anti-science denial when it comes to COVID and vaccines and climate change is it's just like the fear of anything disrupting what is known with an unknown, right? Where the vaccine, you didn't know it your entire life. You've never heard of it. It wasn't a part of your doctor's visits, and it's something new that's been introduced, and thus it must be threatening. And now there's something we may have to adapt to when it comes to climate change, and that's threatening. It's a fear-based freak out that it's exacerbated and multiplied by media figures and people in office. But I'm like, what do you do when people are so afraid and then it's
interesting
antagonism towards liberal culture and they identify it as with that
feeling? It's anti-establishment, right?
Right.
It's all anti-establishment. And government doesn't mean establishment. That's, I think, the difference. There's some leftists who believe government can do good if we are empowered to do that good. The state can actually do better than the capitalists. You have this populist population that is not able to differentiate big business from state and doesn't trust either one of them because they think they're influencing each other.
Or some people.
I mean, I think to a certain extent, I mean, some of that's true. I mean, I do think that, like, I don't think being skeptical or nervous about the vaccine in and of itself in a vacuum was wrong, right? Like, I mean, you know, it is, but, and particularly, you know, 7 months ago, I mean, I think, like, you know, the idea that they developed this quickly is, you know, is tricky, but, and you know, you hadn't heard about mRNA, let's say, but at one point, then you start to realize, like, okay, now we've had tens, hundreds of millions of people take this. And there are two things that we can observe. We can observe how people are reacting to the vaccine, and we can observe how people are reacting to COVID. Right? At one point, like, you know, you start to just, it just becomes a sort of a calculation. And there's a lot of people who are just completely misinformed. and they're living in this sort of like bubble where their information, I mean, that is the scariest part, is that aside from like whatever emotional response they have to some things, there's no mechanism in which to reach them, to have them have a more rational reaction.
Mm-hmm. This is it, Sam, though. This is it. It's not an accident. It's not just like, oh, they're misinformed because they have idiots on Facebook who are sharing things.
I understand.
There is a mechanism. And the problem is that our government right now in the US is so, when we talk about Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema holding up our government right now, they're holding up any potential looking into of the monopolies that are controlling our ecosystem that's sharing information. We know very well, it's not just Facebook, it's Twitter, it's YouTube. You know, there is an overwhelming presence on the right and a boosting of the right, whether it's from capital simultaneously feeding in and like organizing around these algorithms. That is a thing, and it's happening internationally. The difference is somewhere like in the EU, they can actually regulate because they don't have to deal with the filibuster. They don't have to deal with campaign finance. And they're just starting to catch up to it here in a way that like we, you know, some of us have been, but we're frozen. We're frozen.
You know, there's Eamon Hawke, the guy who did that Crowder video, is doing a GoFundMe to raise money. And we should put a link into the podcast and YouTube description to raise money to get us, you know, I don't know if it was actually a supercomputer, but getting a really powerful computer so that they can render their work quicker. And you go and you look at their website, and it's like all these amazing animations of these right wingers. And somebody I had talked to online was like, you know, trying to get some exposure for this, and they're like, you know, if the DNC, this person's not terribly political, the DNC had half a brain, they'd be funding this. Now, of course, the DNC can't, but if Eamon Hawke was a right winger, the Mercers or somebody would have dropped like, you know, supercomputer. You're going to have multiple supercomputers. You're going to have a whole staff of people who are going to be turning this stuff out. You're going to be an organization, you know, whatever it is, like animations for the right or whatever it is. Like, there would be no hesitation. And there's, you know, the mechanisms for the disinformation on the right is just much more powerful than it is, you know, never mind even from like a, you know, just even like mainstream on some level.
I don't even buy the Mercers, right? I get all that. I get that they have the money, and we do too, by the way. Nina Turner raised just as much money as her opposition did, and they knew that the super PACs were coming. The question is, do we have to outthink them every step of the way? But simultaneously, we as progressives, it is not the same. If you decide to run for office today and you're not a Nina Turner and you're not a name, you're not going to raise the same amount of money that you could 3 or 4 years ago, because the algorithms have absolutely shifted in favor of the right wing. And that can be regulated. That can be regulated.
No, I agree. I mean, I think the way that you regulate this too is you also just make it not as profitable. But
it's designed to be profitable. I don't agree with you, Sam, on this. I think that the intention is that it's not that it's more profitable to be full of hate and have men on air more than women. It's Fox News figured out very quickly. Oh, you put more women on, more people watch. It doesn't work that way on YouTube. It just doesn't. There are very few women who host shows, like independent women who host shows. There always has to be a man, or it's just a male show, because the audience is more male driven because of.
You're talking about politics.
Yeah, I'm talking about I'm specifically politics. Yes.
Well, my point is that you can regulate how the algorithm works for all of this type of social media, where it's not driving a specific type of content, and it's not feeding, it's not feeding the desire for the type of conflict, and there's ways of doing that, and you can.
I'll be honest, I don't want to do this anymore. The amount of hate I get, and I know Emma gets it too. Listen, this is a moment. We have like we're talking to each other behind the scenes. You know how much hate women get who are on these shows? We don't want to do it anymore. It's painful because.
I mean, I still want to do it because I have no other skills.
Emma, that's BS. You're also 10 years younger than me. 10 years younger. You have more energy. to. No, but the reality is it's like we understand the service, and like for every 10 horrible, nasty messages we get, death threats, thousands of followers that are lost, whatever it is, we have messages that are so wonderful from women, from men, from people whose lives have been changed, and it keeps us going. But the truth is, it is painful. I am not on Twitter as much anymore. It is not their goal, the strategy is to silence AOC, to silence all of these people, to silence the smaller names, to silence the entire ecosystem, because it's dangerous. Death threats. You know how many death threats we get a week? I mean, how many death threats do you get a week? How many death threats does Anna get a week? How many death threats does Cori Bush get a week? I mean, the whole lineup. And that is how this thing is built, and it has to be regulated. It's not just a funding mechanism. It is called, they're trying to silence opposition.
I mean, I agree with that, but I mean, I think that's a different conversation than the science denial. I mean, I do. I mean, I think like
I disagree. Look at the people who are doing this. Same people.
I mean,
Joe Rogan, science denialist, attacking AOC. Tucker Carlson, science denialist, attacking AOC and Cori Bush. Sorry, Emma, go ahead. I didn't.
No, I think even before Joe Rogan, before all these people, we were having these the point I was trying to make about climate change, which I feel like, I don't know, we're too far past it, but the linking of fear-based politics and unknowns, and then kind of manifesting it into larger politics of fear and resentment of certain liberal culture. Fox News has been doing that since its existence. So the
right has been doing that. I mean, Gertrude Himmelfarb, Bill Kristol's mom, was talking about undercutting the concept of science, 50 years ago.
They've just made a purer form of it.
Well, they've just, their mechanism, their delivery mechanism has improved because they have the resources and whatnot. I mean, so this dynamic is there. And then the question is, how do you mitigate or neutralize, to the extent that you can, the tactics? And I think there's a lot of different, I think the way to do it, I mean, I am hesitant to, I don't know what regulation you're talking about that would address the idea of getting a hate mail.
Okay, so I think it overlaps. It's not that it's hate mail and misogynist. It's that these communities, when you're addressing who is falling for, who are the most likely people to not fall for the vaccine, understand vaccine science, or believe that climate change exists. Oh, simultaneously, they're the same people who are watching the hosts who are making money off of targeting AOC, the same hosts that are building their ecosystem. But Sam, this isn't debatable at this point. I'm sorry. I was at a conference 2 weeks ago, and the opposition leader in Turkey, a female, who's going up against Erdogan, said the same exact things. The defense minister of Northern Macedonia, a female, said the same thing was happening. An opposition leader in Hungary, a woman, same exact thing. This is happening across the world. The same, and it's the right is more organized, and we're still trying to figure out the patterns.
But
the reality.
What do you mean? Well, I'm just confused as to how that connects to the science angle.
It's the same audience. They're the same people. Okay, so when you have men online pushing this misinformation, and male, except for Marine Le Pen maybe, and a couple of others, for the most part, there's a group of male influencers who have male audiences targeting young men who are more vulnerable to being radicalized, and they're targeting them with, whether it's misogynistic, racist, pseudo-populist, the government is out to get you. By the way, the vaccine is something you should be in fear of, and simultaneously climate change doesn't exist. All these messages overlap, just like the Republican Party in general has, the far right has a message.
So what does government do about that?
I listen, this is, you don't think that Twitter and YouTube and Facebook, which were much more democratized
I'm not
5 years ago,
I'm not disputing attention.
make the algorithms open.
Well,
Government can demand that.
That's what I'm saying. You make it, and what does that mean? It ultimately means make it less profitable. I mean, it ultimately means that you inhibit the business model in such a way that you cannot have this type of profitability. It won't necessarily address. It might, I think, as a knock-on impact. The sort of like the misogyny and this and that, because you're just not creating these juggernauts. You're preventing the social media from creating these juggernauts, but the underlying dynamic is gonna stay. It's just you're inhibiting the tools that they have to make it grow more. I mean, I think there's another phenomenon going on. Like, I think it's just too narrow to say that like Joe Rogan is implicating this stuff, worldwide. I think he is a product as much of as, or more of a product of that than a driver of it. And the thing is that it becomes self-perpetuating, and it builds speed like a rock rolling downhill. And part of that is because it's so wildly profitable for so many of these entities to promote that stuff. And the way that you inhibit it, it seems to me, is you make it less profitable. I mean, that's just the way.
Two things can be true at once, right? So Joe Rogan, with all due respect to Joe Rogan, I don't think he's as sophisticated to think, okay, I would like to have, really thoughtful conversations with authors and comedians and actors and Bernie Sanders, as much as he realized he could pull Bernie Sanders' audience and simultaneously Elon Musk's audience. And I don't think he's as sophisticated I don't actually think he's thinking enough personally about whether or not he should be questioning the vaccine. I actually think that's a strategy that's coming from his team to build a wider net audience, just like there are people out there who dance with the left and the right.
I really don't think that's Rogan. I mean, I just think that, I think that
he has the largest podcast on the planet. You don't think he has a team that's saying, hey, Joe, maybe you should do XYZ thing. Of course.
I think there are people who feed him stuff, but I can tell you, like, when the thing was growing, I don't know, a couple of years ago, it was just like, it was not terribly different than Marin.
A couple of years ago, Jimmy Dore was more leftist than he is now. And we had real conversations, and you can find those videos from a couple of years ago where he was.
Rogan's attitude towards stuff has not really changed. He was doing the same shit 5 years ago. And I can tell you.
Was he as political?
What? Yeah, I mean, sort of.
I mean, he's had like guys like Douglas Murray, and like he's always been talking to those guys.
Charles Murray?
No, Douglas.
Oh.
Douglas the.
I mean, this was, I just know how the thing started, and it was. I mean, he and Marin would just, like they were just two podcasters who were doing stuff. I mean, it was, I just, I think there are.
Oh, that's the Sam Harris guy. Sorry, never mind.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. There may be people around him that advise him at this point, but I think it's probably just more like his longtime manager or longtime agent. Like, I think it's more entertainment people. And I don't think that there's anybody, I think he honestly, I just think that like, he's not terribly, informed or thoughtful about some things. I mean, I just think that's basically what it is. And
so what is it about his audience that like, okay, like someone like a Tommy Lahren, for instance. Tommy Lahren is like super famous. She doesn't have a deal with Spotify, or like, I mean, and she's like dead in the political world right now. Like she's like washed up at this point.
I don't think he ever perceived himself in that world. He was just doing, what do you call it? MMA. I mean, that's what the guy was doing. And then it was just like, oh, people are listening to me. And, he's a comedian. And so that starts with a notion of like, I want to go up on stage and have people listen to me. And then any idea that comes into your head, and if you don't have any sense of like what the implications are of this, I mean, it's not that. I just don't. I think that he is a different animal than, let's say, like, people who have been, work at the Daily Caller.
Yes.
just in terms of like, what drives them.
Exactly. No, but that's exactly the point, Sam. He's not a daily caller person. He's somebody who can dance in these different spaces and endorse Bernie Sanders and then support the Hill. Like that's his news.
All right, yeah, we got to move on. I just don't think it's calculated. I just don't. I mean, but it doesn't matter. Like I don't know. I'm lost as to where we are. But I wanted to talk about what we know at this point of the reconciliation bill. This is the budget bill, and this coming from Jeff Stein, according to Bernie Sanders, child tax benefit, universal pre-K, paid family and medical leave, tuition-free community college, lower prescription drug costs, dental, hearing, and vision Medicare expansion, housing, unclear what that means, home care, I think that's the $400 billion for primarily, elderly care, major climate money, don't know, immigration, lower Medicare age, Obamacare expansion, not exactly sure what the provision is for that. Increasing physical supply. I'm not sure what that means. And too many climate clean energy plans to summarize here. This is Jeff Stein just on Twitter. New revenue comes from beefed up IRS tax enforcement, raising taxes on people making more than $400,000 a year, taxing corporations, fees on polluters, and Medicare negotiations, which will save on the prescription drug costs. I mean, this is a big deal.
Did he say Medicare eligibility age?
In this tweet.
Yeah, lowering it.
I lost
Lower the
track
Medicare
without
age.
the
Lower the Medicare
in front of
age.
me.
But wait, when he says like enforcing IRS, beefing up IRS enforcement, like of whom? Because so far they've just been enforcing like working people and
well, of course, but there was testimony at the beginning of the year from the IRS. The IRS commissioner was like, "We're leaving, hundreds of billions of dollars, if not trillions of dollars, on the table because we don't have the money to go after." I mean, the reason why they go after low-income people is because low-income people don't have the means in which to have a lawyer who are going to tie them up. And wealthy people will just hire an accounting firm or, forensic auditors or whatnot, and just basically make the IRS feel like this is a unsafe bet to go after this money. And I think the way that you do this, you simply fund the IRS more. We know essentially that every dollar you put into the IRS, you're going to get back anywhere from $5 to $7. And so I think the IRS, they've already picked the low-hanging fruit. And they're going after the fruit that's a little bit higher up on the tree. And that means you fund them, you give them more money, you hire more people, they go after, and they have more durability and resiliency. And also, then people who are avoiding taxes are also aware of this too. And they want to avoid penalties. There's more compliance. That's the theory, I think.
Well, I mean, yeah, I'm happy that they're including. Do you guys have that tweet? Just so I have the list in front of me.
I have it right here.
Jeff Stein?
Yeah, I have it.
Oh, it's in the packet.
No, I just printed it out. Sorry
You
about
printed
that.
it out during commercial or during the
No,
podcast?
this was earlier today.
Oh my God. Well, no, it's all right. I
can't believe it.
Wow.
You didn't. Jeff Stein shows up in like.
I'm trying to find it too. He might have deleted it already.
There could be more information. All right. Well, listen, we're out of time. I'm going to read 5 more IMs and then we're going to get going. We'll talk more about this bill tomorrow. Sam's hanging Chad. I was wondering why you guys don't just post the AM Quickie stuff on a website, kind of like in the format of the site of the Daily Poster. There is a link where you can actually just, when you get it, you just click through to it online. Dimmy Jor. Hey, Sam, I was just reading the Tim Pool article in the Daily Beast. Did you see the part where they link to a comic strip created by the mid-2010s by Ryan Grimm making fun of Tim when he was at Vice? He depicts Tim as a life-size talking penis wearing a beanie who gets kidnapped by ISIS while live streaming from his Google glasses. Also, I had no idea Ryan was so funny. I don't think I saw that. Randy Fraz, please remind Californians to vote no on the gubernatorial election recall. We don't need Larry Elder as our governor. When is that? It's not.
The recall?
Yeah.
Oh, shoot.
Today?
No. Wait.
No, not today.
September 14th, Tuesday, September 14th.
I gotta get.
Bugger Wolf.
Sorry, guys.
Have you read about the Ligma variant? It's looking pretty dangerous. The Ligma? I haven't heard of it. I know there's one, there's the Gamma. Maybe that's a joke. And Buonara. Emma made Sam blush. That was that comment that you had earlier.
You know,
Cuomo.
I thought it was something different.
All right.
I looked it up on Urban Dictionary. I mean, I thought it was like more of a groping thing.
Yeah, it's not so much a groping thing.
Wait, I missed this. Can you do it again?
No.
Please.
Pot.
See you later.
For those of us unfamiliar with New York politics, who are the potential progressive candidates that can win the empty seat? We'll have time to talk about that. It's not going to happen for a year and change. Sam from Ottawa. Not going to.
January, they're going to start lining up. What are you talking about, Sam?
Well, they're going to start lining up, but we're going to have more time to talk about it than at 2:30. Sam from Ottawa, concerning Eamon getting funding and the right versus left funding these things, it's easy to measure the return on disinformation. It's harder to measure the return on memes. Governor Andrew Cuomo, I do it with the healthy. I do it with the crippled. I do it with the Crips. I do it with the blood donors. I do it with the Knicks. I do it with the Nets. I even did it with Jason Collins one time. And the final I am of the day. What do you mean? If anyone ever wanted to know why it took me so long to show my face on my channel, pretty much better of what Nomi is talking about. Not
Is
sure.
that a woman?
It is, yep.
All right, folks. Nomi, Emma, Matt, Bradley, good job. See you tomorrow.
Bye, y'all.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there.